It's time for the Las Vegas Sportsline, brought to you by the Sunset Station with sports director Chuck Esposito. Presented by WagerTalk.com.
And here we go. It's the Friday edition of the Las Vegas Sportsline. I am Dave Cokin. Teddy covers us here. Kelly Stewart's going to join us in a little bit. And Chuck Esposito's on the phone right now. We've got a little bonus Chuck this week. We had him on Monday. We had him again today. Talk about what's going on the weekend. Loads of stuff, that's for sure. Hi, Chuck. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dave. How are you today?
Doing fine, and looking forward to what's going to be a really exciting weekend. And I guess we might as well start. Let's get right to it. I mean, the NBA is suddenly getting really fun. Okay, I mean, after an arduous regular season in which nothing happened, basically, now we're getting some really good matchups in the NBA. And Game 6 last night turned out to be gold for the teams that were in survival mode. How was that from a betting standpoint?
They were bet that way. It was actually really good for the guys on the other side of the counter. I know we talked on Monday that we'd see how this series played out, but it was good for the bettors. And now the focus tonight is, there's no hockey tonight. There's one game in the NBA, and it is just a marquee matchup. Game 6 with, that series with Golden State up 3-2. No Durant against Houston. Everything points to this game, this series going 7 games. But I think the big question is how does Golden State kind of move forward without Durant? I mean, you look at this series where all 5 games have been decided by, 5 points or less, and he makes up such a huge portion of their overall points. I think close to 30% of the Warriors' postseason points this season is by Kevin Durant. He scores from everywhere on the court. He makes everybody better. I know they've won a title without him, but this is going to be a tough task, I think. And they lose tonight. It's going to set up a real interesting game on Sunday for Game 7.
So we'll talk about the other 2 Game 7s in a little bit, but let's first concentrate on this one. And it looks like the line adjustment for Durant is between 4 and 5 points. And I saw that, in my immediate response was, that's ridiculous. Nobody. This isn't Mike. I mean, he's a great player, but he's not Michael Jordan, and I'm not sure Michael Jordan was worth 5 points in a one-game adjustment. So the bettors apparently disagree with that because it looks like there's plenty of money on Houston.
There is. I think the number actually ticked down just a little bit early on, and I was asked the same question: What is Durant worth? And I said 2.5 to 4.5 points, just depending on the situation. We saw the line adjustment even after the Rockets won Game 3, being 3.5, and then the Game 3 line comes out 1-1, or Game 4 line comes out 1.5. And the action is clearly on Golden State, and it flip-flops the favorite. So a lot of times it's based on, I think, what the situation is. But I think the 2.5 to the 4.5 range was a little bit more accurate than 5. I think 5 is clearly an over-adjustment, but we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Curry and Thompson tonight. I mean, Curry's never averaged more than 28.3 points per game in the playoffs. So you're asking him to really make up some of that scoring, and Thompson, and neither guy has had a great series so far.
At times in the regular season, you can make a case that a key starter sitting is worth 6, 7, even 8 points.
Right.
Because
in the regular season,
it speaks to the mentality of how that team's going to play for that game, and especially the second night of back-to-backs or something like that, and so sitting. I mean, look at the Sixers without Embiid as a class example of a guy who's worth more than even the markets might react. But
well, what's strange, guys, is I think, you compare it a little bit to the NFL, and I would say several years ago, we were adjusting games when you'd have a Roethlisberger or a Breeze or a top-end quarterback out. You looked at it at maybe the first adjustment was maybe 4 in that range. But over the last year or two, that adjustment, regardless of who that quarterback is almost always 6 or 7 points now, and sometimes even greater than that. So I think part of it is the public's perception of what that individual means to the team, and that gets factored more into the number and more into the way the game is bet. So I think that's taken into consideration a little bit too, and I think that's why you see this adjustment maybe a little higher than what we actually think he's worth.
Well, here's my counter to that. He's essentially Draymond Green's going to move in his spot, okay? Mm-hmm. So to me, there's not a 5-point differential between the two. Now, there is obviously going to be maybe 1 or 2 on a power rating. Now you're replacing Green, therefore, because somebody has to slide in and take his place. So maybe that's another point. I thought 3 was about as high as I would go on an adjustment. So to me, it created some value here in Golden State.
Well, don't forget, too, that there's no player on the Warriors that has played more minutes than Durant. So I think in the postseason. So I think without him in there, it changes so many of the dynamics on that team. Again, they won a title without him. So, I mean, it's not catastrophic. I just think it's the reaction that he's meant so much to that team, averaging, 34, close to 34 points per game in the postseason, how many minutes he plays. He's more creative. He drives more. He makes everybody around him better. They're able to change that rotation somewhat and be much deeper on the bench than they are without him. So I think you just factor all those things in. But you look at Houston, and although everything runs through Harden, they're not an offensive juggernaut, say, for points per game. So, and I think defensively they can play a little bit more lockdown. So I think when you look at the number with what it is, I think there is some value with the Warriors, in my opinion.
And total-wise, because you talked about Houston's defense, and nobody's talking about the Rockets' defense right now.
Just did. They're much better than what people give them credit for.
Nobody except Chuck Esposito is talking about the Rockets' defense right now. And this is a team that closed out the regular season. The last 15 games, they were number 2 in the NBA in defensive efficiency. You look at their postseason numbers. And even against this extremely hard-to-defend Warriors offensive attack, Houston's defense has held up. They've been impressive for about 20, 25 games right now. And yet the money's come tonight on the over. What do you make of that?
I think it's just, the style of play, too, that maybe without Durant you're going to see Thompson and Curry even throw up more threes. And if those guys are hitting, I think the total will go over. And I think it's just these two teams being two Western Conference teams. And you're right, most people just on the surface, they would tell you that the Rockets do score more than they do. And I think that's the reason. I mean, Durant, too, you have to remember that he is such a good two-way player that he might be, one of their top defensive players as well. So they lose that on the defensive end. So it wouldn't surprise me to see this game go over, but I think that's the reason you're seeing it bet that way, guys.
All right. We want to talk about the other games, the other series that are still going. Obviously, the Bucks are waiting around now to see who they're going to play, and it will be the winner of Game 7 between Philadelphia and Toronto. Good response by the 76ers last night. A lot of people thought they might be done. They responded with a strong effort, and now it's a best of one at Toronto. The problem with Philadelphia is they have so much trouble playing 2 straight games the same way, and boy, they're off a good game, and that would make me worry about whether they can come up with another good effort tomorrow. What's the market say right now?
Well, I think too with what you said, Dave. I think you look at this entire series, and for whatever reason, I mean, neither team seems to show up the next game. You win a game and then you get blown out. You win a game and then you get blown out. You look at from a competitive standpoint that these two teams who know each other so well played so many games during the regular season, and they should know strengths and weaknesses and styles. That so many of these games have been blowouts here. I think you're going to see the number continue to tick up in favor of Toronto, in my opinion. And, if Houston and Golden State plays out the way we think it may based on the number, it's going to be a fun Sunday because you're going to have a triple header of Game 7s.
Yeah, exactly. Mothers beware.
Yeah, really.
Everyone will be in front of the TV, that's for sure, guys.
Yeah, so, I mean, the long-term history for Game 7s is all about the home team. NBA's got 133 Game 7s. In my sample size, and I'm showing 105 and 28 straight up for the home teams. But yet, you talked about this series being back and forth. I think a lot of the back and forth's been Embiid hasn't been right, and the games where Embiid's been right, Philly's been the better of the two teams. So kind of a back and forth there with the home teams dominate, but maybe Philly's a better squad when they have their centerpiece at his best.
I can buy into that. Although I still think Toronto with a Kawhi Leonard in a 7th game is the side I think will win that basketball game. The one that's got me, look, I know Denver's been a better team than Portland in this series, but that was a good win by Portland last night. Yep. And now, this is the type of game, Chuck, where Lillard might just, the best player on the court might take over, and that's Lillard. So I think this is a fascinating Game 7. And by the way, the winner, I don't think the winner's going to be scared of the Warriors-Rockets, to tell you the truth. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I think the Western Conference Final could be more competitive this year than some people thought it might be.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And this series has been fun to watch too. I really thought Portland was gassed in the last two games that they played in Denver, especially the second game. I think they know what it's like up there. They know the altitude. They're going to have to be conditioned to play there tonight. I mean, they're playing against a team that was really good at home, had the best record in the Western Conference at 34-7. So I think it's going to be a good matchup tonight. I think there'll be a lot of scoring in that game, but it's going to be interesting. I said tonight, I mean tomorrow in that game. But
right.
This series has been entertaining, guys.
And in terms of the early betting action for Portland, Denver, have you seen much? The betting side, the betting total?
Just a little bit, guys. I think where it opened, we've seen it tick up just a little bit in favor of Denver, and I think that is again that Portland was gassed. And I think you look at the team with the best record in the Western Conference at home, it's not going to surprise me to see that number continue to go up a little bit.
So now it leaves us with the Milwaukee Bucks, who have basically had no competition at all in the playoffs. The Detroit Pistons, that was a walkover series. The Celtics are so screwed up. That was basically a walkover series. The first game was, Boston's high point. From that point on, it was all Milwaukee in that series, and by some significant margins. About the only negative thing you can say is, well, they might get rusty, which, the rust lasts for about 10 minutes, if there's any.
Well, they were rusty in game one against Boston. They got blown out at home in that game.
Yeah, I guess.
They did. That was the only poor performance they had in that series.
Yeah, and I think they might have learned something from that, too, in terms of how to get ready and how to stay sharp. They're in good position right now. And look, I've been one of those people who said the last few years nobody's going to beat Golden State. I don't know. I mean,
that's what makes this year's playoffs interesting.
The Bucks are pretty good.
I think you look at Milwaukee, and they didn't limp into the playoffs. They went in winning 7 of their last 10 games. The best record in the Eastern Conference, the best home record in the Eastern Conference. They get handled in Game 1, and I think a lot of people pointed to a young team. Are they ready? Was there rust there? Then they win Game 2, then they handily go in and win 2 games in a row in Boston. And then Game 5, we talked about it, and this was a young team, and it's always difficult when you're kind of taking that next step to close somebody out. And they were really impressive in that game for me, guys. I mean, it was really never a contest. They're a confident bunch. Could they be a little rusty? Absolutely. But this is a really good team. And if they're in the finals, they're a dangerous team. I don't think they're scared of anybody.
And from a point spread perspective, Milwaukee's been the undervalued commodity of the NBA this season, and that hasn't changed in the postseason.
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, you have Milwaukee and Golden State in the final with two teams that average around 118 points per game. Ooh. You can only imagine what those totals will be like, guys. And from our side of the counter, trying to keep them under isn't going to be fun.
No, but I'll tell you what, it's the type of series that'll pack people into the sports book. It'll, considering now that we have the mobile apps everywhere, I can see this being the highest bet in terms of volume, the highest bet NBA final series ever if it happens.
I think it'll be tremendous. I think, the one maybe tiny bit knock, and it's not that on the Bucks team, but just small market. I think there's probably a lot of people that aren't as familiar with Milwaukee. I mean, if you're talking about a big market team like Boston and Golden State in the final, but I love Milwaukee. I love the team that they put around Giannis. I think they're a very good team. They've got a deep bench. They believe in one another. They're good at home. They're good on the road. Largest point differential in the league, highest scoring team in the league. And I think from that vantage point, I totally agree with you that you will see, more props, a lot of action. And again, you're going to see some extremely high totals, maybe the highest we've ever seen for an NBA Finals.
One last question about the NBA. And this is a specific question to stations, of course. And we've got to know. Are we in position right now where you have future book liabilities on a number of teams and you're rooting for certain teams? Or is the NBA playoffs, you're not worried, you have no future book liability that you need to be concerned about?
No, I think in all cases, guys, you always see some value on teams bet throughout the year. There's no question that the Rockets were a hyped team throughout the season, and people felt that there was a legitimate chance that if they ended up meeting up with the Warriors, that they could beat them. So that's a team that was bet heavily in the future book. Overall, pretty good shape with